the warbands fight to the death for honor, treasure, and glory in the underworlds in Warhammer Underworlds.
And today we'll be teaching you how to play Warhammer Underworlds, and here we have the 2-player starter set. This game is by Games Workshop.
And hello everyone, it's Stella.
And Tarrant from the Dice Tower.
Let's get to the game.
Warhammer Underworlds is a tactical battle game. Each player will take on the role of a warband, who will move and fight, trying to take the opposing fighters out of battle and meet the objectives on personal objective cards, all in the aim of gaining the most glory. A battle runs over 3 rounds of play, and whoever scores the most glory will be the winner. Warhammer Underworlds is a highly customizable game with many different warbands to play, fighters and minis to collect and paint, and add-on cards which you can gain to customize and build your power and objective decks. But in this video, we'll be taking you through the contents of the 2-player starter set. And with this, you'll be able to launch straight into a 2-player game between the Iron Soul Condemners and the Sepulchre Guard, each with pre-built objective and power decks. To set up, choose which of the warbands you'll play, and take all of your cards with the matching symbol. Collectively, everything you control is known as your warband. You'll have a number of individual fighters, each represented by a card and a mini depicted in its corner. Lay all fighter cards out separately and flip them over to the blue side to begin the game. You'll have decks of blue power cards and yellow objective cards, which you'll shuffle face down. Then draw a starting hand of 5 power cards and 3 objective cards. For each individual type of card, you may do one complete mulligan, discarding all the cards you drew, redrawing, and then shuffling the discards back into the deck. The rulebook has a full suite of rules to explain how the players can tactically set up the boards, the tiles, and their minis, and this goes over several rounds of back and forth placements. But for your first game, it's recommended going to the book labelled Read This First, turn to pages 8 and 9, and then set up the board exactly as shown here. Some quick notes about this board. Only hexes that have all 6 sides are considered to be in play. Any of these incomplete hexes are treated as if they don't exist. All hexes which are completely on the separable board where your fighters begin are considered your territory. As the board is laid out here, all of these hexes are in nobody's territory. A hex with a thick white outline, usually showing an obstacle, is considered blocked, while these numbered tiles are called objective tiles. They're placed during setup, but they're not blocked. Players can freely move on to them. Hexes with this icon are considered valid spaces for fighters to begin. Give each player 4 activation tokens flipped to the lit side. Keep all remaining tokens, pieces, and dice nearby ready for use. Choose a first player, and you're now ready to play. Warhammer Underworld is played in 3 rounds, and in each round, each warband will take a total of 4 turns, and these are tracked by flipping over these activation markers. You'll take turns starting from the first player and going around the table. After each player has taken 4 turns, you'll resolve the end phase to clean up the round, and then proceed to the next round. The aim of the game is to score the most glory, and there are 2 ways to gain glory. Either by taking the other player's fighters out of the battle by winning in combat, in which case you gain glory as a bounty, or by meeting the tactical objective printed on an objective card in your hand, in which case you would gain the glory shown at the bottom and discard the card. When gained, glory enters your collection on the yellow side up. Through the game, certain actions require you to spend glory, in which case you'd flip the glory over to its darkened side, but in the end, all glory, both light and dark, counts equally towards your final score. A player's turn is resolved in two major steps, the activation step and the power step. In the activation step, you'll perform a single activation, which will usually involve choosing one of your fighters and then taking an action with it, such as moving or attacking. Although in some cases you may take an off-board action like drawing cards. Then in the power step, both players have the opportunity to play power cards from their hand, resolving them for the various effects. And this will start from the active player and go back and forward until all players have passed. In addition to those two major steps, there are also three smaller types of steps: reaction, inspire, and surge. And those have some different timing rules, which we'll come back and explain later in the video. For now, we'll have a look at how to resolve an activation. In your activation step, you may perform one or more actions as part of a single activation. In most cases, you'll activate one of your fighters on the board, and that fighter will take either an action or a super action. With a super action meaning that you take more than one action, one after the other, as part of a single activation. There are 6 different options for a fighter activation. These are to take a move action, take a stun action, take a barge super action, which is a move action followed by a stun action, to make an attack action, to make a charge super action, which is a move action followed by an attack action, or to make a guard action. There are also 3 activation options which do not involve your fighters, and these are to draw one power card, to cycle your objectives by discarding one objective card and replacing it from the deck, or to pass. You simply forfeit the activation. So now let's look at each of these activations in detail. First is move. Choose which of your fighters you're going to move and then check its movement range, which is shown in the hex icon here. You may move that chosen fighter into an adjacent empty hex up to that number of times. For these and all purposes, an empty hex is one that is not blocked and that does not contain a fighter, whether it be friend or foe. Objective tiles have no impact. You must also finish your move in a different hex to where you started. So, as an example for this fighter, these would not be valid paths because they go into non-empty hexes. But this would be an allowable move. When any fighter finishes a move action, give that fighter a move token. There's no limit to the number of move tokens a fighter may have, but having at least one move token places other restrictions on that fighter's options. Move tokens, and indeed all square token types which we'll encounter through the rules, last only until the end of the round in which they're obtained. When taking the stun action, choose an adjacent opposing fighter and give that fighter one staggered token. There is no limit to the number of such tokens a fighter may have. Being staggered weakens a fighter when it defends in combat. The third option is to take a barge super action. This involves the active unit taking a full move action and then taking a full stun action. The fourth type of activation is to attack. For the fighter which is taking the activation, check the card. You'll have one or more attack options available and must choose one of those attacks. This number on the left is the range of the attack, so here both attacks are range 1. And you must choose a valid opposing target within this range. For a range of 1, that just means an adjacent fighter, so this fighter could target any one of these 3. If the range of the attack is greater than 1, then you must be both within range and have line of sight, which requires that you can draw a line between the centres of the attackers and the defenders' hexes without touching a blocked hex or the edge of the map. Here, this would be a valid target, but this would not be because the sight line touches a blocked hex. Neither of these is okay because each touches the edge of the map. Having chosen a valid target, roll white attack dice based on the dice characteristic of the attack you've chosen. If the defender is staggered, then you may choose to re-roll exactly one of your attack dice, regardless of how many staggered tokens it has. Then the defender rolls black defense dice based on its defense characteristic. Next, we'll evaluate the number of successes rolled and the tactical layouts on the board to determine which of 4 possible outcomes this attack has. And these could be critical hit, hit, draw, or miss. First, you'll count up both sides' critical successes, represented by this icon. If the attacker has more critical successes than the defender, then the attack is a critical hit. If the defender has more critical successes than the attacker, then the attack is a miss. If each side had the same number of critical successes, then this part of the check is inconclusive. So now you'll count up successes. Each critical success counts as 1 success. Each die which matches the die symbol shown on your attack also counts as a success. Some attacks have success on hammers, of which there are 2 on each die, and some have success on swords, of which there is only 1. This situation is similar on the defensive side. Your defensive successes could be in the form of a shield, of which each die has 2, or in the form of a dodge, for which each die has only 1. Next, check the tactical layout on the board, as this could give either side some extra successes. First, you'll look for support. Each friendly fighter who is adjacent to your opponent's fighter in this battle counts as 1 support. For example, in the battle between these 2 fighters, this is the target and there are no adjacent blue figures next to it, so blue has no support. However, for this attacker, these 2 opposing fighters are adjacent. And so this defender has 2 support in this combat. If, for example, the fight were between these 2 fighters, then the attacking fighter would have this support and the defending fighter would have these 2 support. Whereas if this fighter were attacking this fighter, the attacker would have 1 support and the defender would have no support. If you have 1 or more support for your fighter, then this symbol counts as a success. If you have 2 or more support, then this symbol also counts as a success. Next, check to see if the defender is trapped. A defender is trapped if there is no adjacent empty hex that is further away from the attacker into which that defender could be pushed. For this attack which we've been demonstrating, the defender is not trapped, as either of these hexes is empty. But if this fighter were attacking this one, then this fighter would be trapped. All of these hexes are either blocked or occupied. If the defender is trapped and the attacker has rolled at least 1 success, then the being trapped counts as 1 additional success. So counting up all of those different ways of gaining successes, plus any others which you might have unlocked through upgrades or other cards, determine the outcome. If the attacker has more successes than the defender, and the attacker rolled at least 1 critical success, then the outcome is a critical hit. If the attacker had more successes but did not score any critical successes, then the outcome is a hit. If both sides have the same number of successes and at least 1 success, then the outcome is a draw. And if the defender had more successes or the attacker scored no successes at all, then the outcome is a miss. Having worked out the outcome, you now resolve the consequences. If the result was a hit or a critical hit, then determine how much damage is done by this attack and deal that much damage to the defender. If the defender now has as many or more damage tokens than its wound value, then that defender is taken out of action. remove its mini and any tokens from the board, and give the attacking player a bounty of 1 glory or 2 glory if the defender's wounds was a value of 5 or more. Next, on a critical hit, a hit, or a draw, if the defender has not been taken out of action and the defender was not trapped, the attacker gets to push the defender 1 space into an adjacent hex which is further away. This is called driving the defender back. After all of these steps, the attack action is complete. You'll notice that the standard outcomes for hits and critical hits are the same. Critical hits only matter if you have another specific card or effect which triggers off a critical hit. There are some other attack keywords you'll come across. A cleaving attack means that any shields rolled by the defender cannot count as successes. Likewise, for ensnare, a dodge cannot be counted as a defensive success. The Harvester's Whirling Scythe is a scything attack, and this is actually resolved as a super action in which you perform an attack action one at a time against each adjacent enemy. Finally, if your attack has knockback, then if your outcome drives back the opponent, you can push that opponent back a further number of steps in the same direction, equal to the knockback value. That is, an attack with knockback 1 could push that enemy back 2 spaces. The 5th type of activation is a charge super action, and this involves taking a move action followed by an attack action. The only difference between this and the basic version of the actions is that after the move component, instead of taking a move token, you take a charge token. A fighter who has at least 1 move token cannot take a charge activation. And a fighter who has a charge token cannot be chosen for any activation, unless all of your fighters have charge tokens, in which case they may be activated but may not take a second charge. The final type of action is guard, and a fighter who guards takes a guard token. While holding one, all shields and dodges count as successes in defensive rolls, and that fighter cannot be driven back in battle unless the attacker has knockback. A fighter cannot have both stagger and guard tokens. If a fighter ever gains either type of token, it loses all copies of the other. Once the activation step is complete, you'll go to the power step, and both players are involved in the power step. Starting with the active player and going back and forward, you will take turns to take actions with your power cards, which could be to play a card, salvage a card from your draw deck, or pass. The power step ends once both players have passed in succession. There are 2 types of power cards, gambits and upgrades. Gambits are one-time abilities which are resolved at the point that you play the card. Reveal the card, resolve the text, and then in most cases you'll discard it immediately. In some cases the gambit will resolve a persistent effect, and so the card will remain in a certain location until it says to discard it. An upgrade card may be attached to one of your fighters to make it permanently more powerful. Reveal the upgrade and then pay a cost, which is always equal to 1 glory point. Then choose one of your fighters who is still on the board and attach the upgrade to that fighter. A fighter may have any number of upgrades, and do note that some of your upgrades will be restricted to specific fighters. Your other option in the power step is to salvage. For this, if you have a card in your hand and it is restricted only to fighters who are out of action, then you may discard that card and draw another to replace it. In addition to the activation step and the power step, there are 3 smaller steps: the reaction step, inspire step, and surge step. And these steps can occur several times during each turn in that order. You can think of this in terms of this flowchart on page 33 of the rulebook. At the very start of your turn, there's an opportunity to play reaction effects, then inspire effects, then surge effects. You'll then resolve your activation step, And once that's done, there's again an opportunity for reaction, inspire, and surge. You'll then resolve your power step, and again, there's an opportunity for reaction, inspire, and surge. There are even further opportunities to resolve reaction effects inside the activation step or power step. And this will depend on the specific requirements of that reaction effect. For example, this reaction ability specifically applies after the defense roll of that fighter's first attack action for the round. In each reaction step, each player, in turn order starting from the active player, has the opportunity to play a single relevant reaction ability. Once all reaction abilities have been declared around the players, then they're all resolved in order. During each Inspire step, you'll check the Inspire criteria on each of your fighters still in play. And if you meet that condition, flip the fighter over to its gold-coloured Inspired side. It remains inspired for the rest of the game, having either stronger abilities or new and special actions. Finally, when you get to any surge step, you may resolve surge abilities, and in particular, these will come on objective cards. In this case, you would need to make sure you met the objective during a surge step to play the card and score the glory. A few other things on the main board to explain. Some abilities will allow you to push, and when you do this, for each step of push, you move the pushed fighter one step to an empty hex such that it is further away from you than it was when you started. Unlike knockback, this doesn't have to be in a straight line, so this would be a legal push 2. Blocked hexes are counted in this measure of distance, so in this case a push 2 could not go here because both of these spaces are 2 away from the pusher. Fighters do not interact with objective tiles during movement or attacks. And where these come into play is if your objective card talks about holding objectives. Some actions talk about giving fighters counters or tokens, which are different to the basic token types we've already seen. The Sepulchral Guard talks a lot about raise counters, which are these purple skull counters. And for anything which doesn't have its own counters, you can use the reverse side of the damage tokens to represent them. Once all players have finished 4 turns, you'll proceed to the end phase. Firstly, if you have any end phase objective cards, these will tell you they can only be scored in an end phase, and you meet them, then you can score them now. Next, you may optionally discard any number of objective cards from your hand. Then optionally play any upgrade cards from your hand. Then optionally discard any power cards from your hand. Now draw back up to 5 power cards and 3 objective cards. You don't get to shuffle these discard piles back into a draw deck if you ever run out, so don't go through these too quickly. Finally, remove any square tokens from any fighters on the board and reflip your 4 activation tokens for the next round. Continue playing until 3 rounds have been played in full. This occurs even if all of your fighters are out of action. You'll still continue taking activations and engaging in power steps. Once 3 rounds are done, whoever has the most glory, whether it be spent or unspent, is the winner. If tied and one player has had all fighters taken out of action, then the player with a surviving fighter is the winner. And if still tied, then whoever is holding the highest combined value of objectives breaks the tie. Still tied, victory is shared. And that's how to play Warhammer Underworlds.
Thank you so much for watching. Hit the like button please if you find this video useful. Let us know if you have any questions and comments, and see you next time. Bye!